May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another episode of Tassajara Stories. I'm DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, preserving the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths crossed his. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. So we're going to get right into Tassajara Stories after our pause to meditate. So when you hear the bell, hit pause if you wish, and meditate or whatever for as long as you wish. And when you're ready to come back, hit unpause, and we'll be here to hit the bell in the meditation or whatever and get into the first of two pieces we'll read today of Tassajara Stories, The Early Years with Shunryu Suzuki. Weddings. There were a few weddings at Tassajara in the summer of 1970. Carolyn Morton remembers. He said to us, "Do you think you should be getting married?" I thought, oh, he must think this is a marriage made in heaven. And years later I thought, why did he do that? We went to Tassajara as a couple, and we're living together. I guess he thought it was time. I remember him telling other people not to get married. I remember several women being upset and crying about that. Meg Goller and Ed Brown's courtship was rather short. She said it was actually an arranged marriage. We got married a year and a half after I got there. Ed and I were kind of sweethearts, and we thought it might be nice to explore living together. One day we asked Suzuki Roshi if we could see him together. We said, "Suzuki Roshi, if it's okay with you, we'd like to live together." He said, "Oh, that's wonderful. I'd like to marry you as soon as possible." We said, No, you don't understand. We hardly know each other. We're not ready to be married." I was 23, he was 25. I said, no, we just want to live together. He replied, Would June be all right? Carolyn and Rick's wedding was a low-key event. Ed and Meg's was the biggest bash ever at Tassajara in the Zen era. And I imagine, period. It was set for solstice, June 21st. A number of people arrived a day early and stayed in guest cabins. Others drove in just for the day. The Becks were there, as were Bill and Marion Lambert, and Pauline and Peyton from Jamesburg. Everyone was in high spirits. The ceremony was simple and elegant. They took Buddhist vows and nuptial vows. It was a joyful occasion. Then Suzuki made some comments. Ed Brown said, "The wedding was a grand occasion, but there were some unusually candid words in the extemporaneous remarks at the end when he said we would have a really difficult time of it. He waited until we were married to tell us that." Blanche Hartman recalls, "It was a very heavy wedding. I remember Suzuki Roshi saying, 'All of you are going to have to help Ed and Meg.' Oksan was crying. He said it's going to be very difficult for them." After the wedding, Lou Hartman told Suzuki it was a wonderful wedding. Suzuki said to Lou, shaking his head, "Too serious." So to lighten things up, we all turned to drink. I remember Meg's father unloading crates of booze from his vehicle. There was a scrumptious outdoors wedding feast. The kids were popping the tops off the champagne and filling everyone's glasses. Jane, who wasn't used to drinking alcohol, sat next to Suzuki, who kept topping off her glass. Eventually, she told him she'd had too much and didn't feel well. He said, "Maybe not good to drink so much." She didn't know that when drinking with Japanese, you've got to be ready to leave a full glass when you don't want more. Jim Murphy prepared a big bowl of dark, ripe cherries for the group. "My intention," he said, "was to make the rounds with the cherries for all and decided to offer them to Roshi first. I walked up to him and offered them to Roshi, expecting him to take a few. His face lit up, and he took the whole bowl from me. All I could do was gasho." A small bandstand was created, and a band named the Unburnables came together. Coincidentally, there was a large trash can stationed right next to us with the word Unburnables prominently written on it. Greg was a drummer and set up a little trap set he kept down in the barn. Lou Richmond was on electric keyboard. The two of them were the trained musicians. I joined in clumsily on guitar. Alan Marlowe improvised vocals quite freely. Peter Schneider joined in playing a kazoo. Suzuki wandered over, listened to the jumble of sound, and said to him, "I didn't know you could do that." Peter told him it was easy and handed the kazoo to him. So Suzuki sat on the band platform playing a kazoo and wearing Bill Lambert's cowboy hat. Everyone's memory goes blank at that point. I met Suzuki the next morning at sunrise on his way back from the baths. He was staggering up the road. He wasn't used to drinking. He shook his head and said, "Too much." Ed said, he was right, of course. We had a really difficult time. Blanche said, it was true. They had a really difficult time. Alex Weygers. Driving Richard Baker to the home of Alex and Marion Weygers in Carmel Valley, I said, "You're about to meet the Leonardo da Vinci of Carmel Valley." "Don't exaggerate," he said. "I'm not." Like Mr. Rose, I met Alex Weygers through his student Peter Partch, who called him another master being, like Mr. Rose. Alex was a Dutch Indonesian born in West Java, near Bali, around the turn of the century. He immigrated to the U.S. in 1930. He had a degree in engineering, had shown the U.S. Department of Defense's plans for a new type of helicopter which had the blades below, a distorter, he called it. He spread plans and futuristic drawings on his large redwood slab kitchen table and explained to me why they should have gone with this design. He said he got a patent, but that the military had ignored it in proceeding with prototypes. Said that whenever he read about flying saucer sightings, he thought it must be the military. secretly using his ideas. There was a wood-burning stove in the house he'd built, with stovepipe running up and along and splitting. Never saw so much stovepipe for one stove. He said it saved a lot of heat that way. I was surprised it would draw, but it did. His stone and metal sculpture were in the yard and house. There was a soft, graceful one he said was the Indonesian family, man, woman, child, and water buffalo on the back side. His impressive drawings and etchings on the wall. He liked to use the ingrain in etching so he could get more detail. Gave me one of a wave breaking at Point Lobos. Could see through the wave. Fine work indeed. Alex hated waste and showed how he'd turn scrap metal into art, was an early advocate of sustainable living and recycling, got the discarded rounded slabs from the local Cummings Brothers sawmill, the first cuts off a log, ran them vertically for the exterior of his rounded studio. In an open-air outdoor area in back and below, he taught workshops and private students in the art of blacksmithing, which he called the mother craft. From that base, they could progress to tool making, metalwork, and sculpture. Seemed he could do just about anything. Made his tools from scrap metal, car parts too, rather than buy them. Alex had been an engineer in Seattle, but gave that up for art after his first wife died with son in childbirth. Marion was a UC Berkeley art major. She included plants and anything natural in her pressings and paintings. He and Marion had inherited that land in Carmel Valley from a friend who died in the war. They grew much of their own food and early on got by with their artistic talents, such as making jewelry to sell to tourists in Big Sur. Alex had a philosophy that reminds me of Einstein, who said that he needed no God other than nature. To him, nature was not limited to biological life, but included stones, minerals, water, and air. Suzuki would have been pleased. I brought Baker there because Alex wanted to bequeath his estate to the Zen Center after he and Marion were gone. His artist neighbor had willed his handmade home and estate to the Monterey Art Museum with the hope that they could use it in some educational capacity, and they'd sold it for subdividing. Alex wanted his home and workshop preserved. It was a museum of his life work, and it was too much for the Zen Center to take on, or really for anyone to take on, including his blacksmithing students who met some and wanted to preserve it. It needed Alex and Marion to continue. Alex and Marion came to Tassajara as our guest. A few Zen students went on to study with him. He published a series of well-received books on blacksmithing, tool-making, and sculpture. A man in Chicago did not follow the prominently displayed advice in a book, didn't wear goggles, got an injury in an eye, and sued. The publisher had made sure that all liability reverted to Alex. It dragged on and he couldn't afford it. It took a toll on him. I talked to our Monterey attorney friend, Charles Page, who said he'd help Alex for free, but Alex said it was too late. He said due to stress from that suit, he'd developed a terrible skin rash that stumped Stanford Medical Center and handicapped him toward the end of his life. He died at home in 1989, Marion in 2008. Aha! Stumbled on a 1937 San Francisco Chronicle review of Weygers' work, which said he excelled in a half-dozen professions, and it called him a modern Leonardo da Vinci. A post note. Rick and Carolyn Morton did have a union made in heaven and do have a union made in heaven, as far as I'm concerned. They really seem to have been made for each other. Ed and Meg broke up after some years and are quite close now, have been lifelong friends. Two different success stories. Good call, Suzuki. This has been a Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Booba of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Sanur with Dogged Bandita, Feline Cuchita, and dear lovely Katrinka. And we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.